The year was 2157, and New Geneva Station was buzzing with its usual chaos. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went every day, carrying traders, diplomats, and travelers across the galaxy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had seen it all during her 5 years working as a xenanthropologist at the station. She studied alien cultures, helped with first contact situations, and made sure everyone got along peacefully. But nothing had prepared her for what happened on that Tuesday morning. The emergency alarm started blaring at exactly 9:47 a.m. Elena was having her morning coffee when Captain Harrison's voice crackled through the communication system. All senior staff to docking bay 7 immediately. We have a ... situation. Elena grabbed her scanner and headed toward the docking bay. The corridors were unusually quiet. People were whispering in small groups, and she caught fragments of conversations that made no sense. Words like cursed and dangerous and nobody should touch her floated through the air. When she reached docking bay 7, Elena saw the most beautiful and heartbreaking sight of her life. The ship that had just arrived was called the Ethereal Dawn. It was elegant and silver, built by the Velthari people from the outer rim of the galaxy, but it wasn't the ship that caught everyone's attention. It was the woman who stepped out of it. She was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to be made of liquid silver. It moved and flowed like mercury, catching the light in ways that made Elena's eyes water. Her hair was long and white, floating around her head as if she were underwater. Her eyes were the strangest part. They looked like tiny galaxies, deep purple with swirling stars inside them. She was the most beautiful being Elena had ever seen. She was also completely, utterly alone. The woman walked down the ship's ramp, slowly carrying a small bag that seemed to contain all her possessions. Behind her came 3 other Velthari, all wearing official robes and keeping their distance. They looked nervous, even scared. "That's her," whispered Jenkins, the station's security chief. "That's the cursed one." Elena frowned. What do you mean, cursed? Haven't you heard? She's got something called the touch of the void. Anyone who touches her skin gets hurt. Some say they die. Her own people are afraid of her. Elena watched as the woman, she learned later that her name was Zarathiel, stood in the middle of the docking bay. The Velthari officials were talking to Captain Harrison, but they stayed at least 10 feet away from her at all times. People in the bay were backing away, some crossing themselves, others making protective gestures from their own cultures. The woman just stood there, looking around with those galaxy eyes. Elena could see the sadness in them, the loneliness that seemed to go deeper than the ocean. She had been alone for a very long time. Dr. Rodriguez, Captain Harrison called out, "We need you to help with the translation and cultural protocols. These are the Velthari, diplomatic representatives." Elena walked over to the group, her scanner beeping softly as it analyzed the alien visitors. The lead Velthari official, an elderly man with golden skin and tired eyes, began to speak in heavily accented English. "We bring you Zarathiel, daughter of the dying world Velthara. She comes as bride gift, to seal the alliance between our peoples. We must warn you, she carries the touch of the void. It is dangerous to make physical contact with her." Elena's translation device filled in the gaps, but she could understand most of what he was saying. The Velthari were offering this woman as a bride to form an alliance with humanity. Their planet was dying, and they desperately needed help. But the woman they were offering came with a terrible curse. What exactly happens when someone touches her? Elena asked. The official's face grew dark. Sickness, accidents, sometimes death. The curse has been with her since childhood. She has never felt another's touch without bringing harm. Elena looked over at Zarathiel, who was standing perfectly still, listening to every word. She understood English, Elena realized. She knew exactly what they were saying about her. "Long has she been cursed?" Elena asked gently. 237 years, the official replied. "She has been alone all this time, waiting for someone who might be strong enough to accept her despite the curse." Elena felt her heart break a little. 237 years of being untouchable. 237 years of being feared by everyone around her, even her own people. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and protocol. Zarathiel was assigned quarters in the diplomatic section, far from the main living areas. The Velthari officials explained the terms of their proposed alliance. Their planet was dying because its core was cooling down. They needed new technology and resources to save their people. In exchange, they were offering their most precious possession, though Alina was beginning to understand that they saw Zarathiel as more of a burden than a treasure. As the day wore on, strange things began to happen around the station. Near Zarathiel's quarters, elevator panels flickered and went dark. The artificial gravity in that section fluctuated wildly. 3 maintenance workers who were fixing a pipe nearby suddenly collapsed, unconscious but breathing. The station's medical team couldn't find anything wrong with them. They just fell asleep and wouldn't wake up for hours. When they finally did wake up, they felt fine but couldn't remember what had happened. Word spread quickly through the station. The cursed alien bride was here, and she was dangerous. People started avoiding the diplomatic section entirely. Some of the more superstitious residents began wearing protective charms and refusing to work in that area. Alina found herself fascinated by the whole situation. As a scientist, she wanted to understand what was really happening. Was this curse real, or was there some other explanation? As a human being, she felt deeply sorry for Zarathiel, who seemed to be handling her isolation with quiet dignity. That evening, Alina decided to pay Zarathiel a visit. She found her sitting alone in her quarters reading a book about human history. The room was sparse and cold, with no personal decorations except for a small crystal that glowed softly on the windowsill. "Hello," Alina said softly from the doorway. "I'm Dr. Alina Rodriguez. I'm here to help with cultural exchange and communication." Zarathiel looked up from her book, and Alina was struck again by the sadness in those galaxy eyes. "You should not be here," she said in perfect English, her voice like music. "It is not safe." "I'm a scientist," Alina replied. "I'm curious about everything, including things that might be dangerous." For the first time, Zarathiel smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it lit up her whole face. "Curiosity is a wonderful thing. I've been curious about humans for many years. Your people are so warm, so connected to each other." They talked for an hour, keeping a safe distance between them. Alina learned that Zarathiel had studied 17 different languages and had read thousands of books about human culture. She was brilliant, funny, and desperately lonely. She'd been prepared for this mission her entire life, trained to be the perfect diplomatic bride, even though everyone knew the curse made it impossible. "Do you want to know the cruelest part?" Zarathiel asked, as Alina prepared to leave. "I remember what it felt like before the curse began. I was just a child, maybe 50 years old by your standards. I had friends, family, people who could hold me, comfort me when I was scared. Then one day, everything changed. Alina's heart ached for her. What happened? Our planet's core began to die. Strange energies started flowing through the ground, through the air. I was playing in a garden. When it hit me, I woke up. My parents couldn't touch me anymore. Nobody could. The priests said I had been chosen, that I carried the essence of the dying world inside me. They said it was an honor." Zarathiel's voice was barely a whisper. "I have not felt another being's touch in 237 years. I do not even remember what it feels like anymore." Lena left that night with tears in her eyes and a determination growing in her heart. There had to be an explanation for this curse. There had to be a way to help her. As she walked back to her quarters, Alina didn't notice the man watching from the shadows. He was tall and lean, with engineer's calluses on his hands and concern in his dark eyes. He had been listening to the whole conversation, and something about Zarathiel's story had touched him deeply. His name was David Chen. He was about to change everything. David Chen had been fixing broken things his whole life. Starship engines, water systems, power grids if it was broken. He could make it work again. But he had never encountered anything like what happened 3 days after Zarathiel arrived. At New Geneva Station, he was doing his regular maintenance rounds when the emergency lights started flashing in the diplomatic section. His tablet showed multiple system failures happening all at once. The elevator was stuck between floors, the air recycling system was going crazy, and the artificial gravity was switching on and off like a broken light switch. "What in the world?" David muttered, grabbing his toolkit and heading toward the chaos. When he reached the diplomatic corridor, he found sparks flying from the wall panels. The overhead lights were flickering so fast it looked like a lightning storm. And standing in the middle of it all was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to flow like water. Her hair was white as snow and floated around her head like she was underwater. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They looked like tiny galaxies, deep purple with swirling stars inside them. She was also crying. "Stay back." Out when she saw him. "Please, do not come closer. I am causing this. I cannot make it stop." David looked around at the chaos. Other people were running away, shouting about the cursed alien bride. But David's engineer brain was working differently. He wasn't seeing a supernatural curse. He was seeing patterns in the electrical failures, specific types of electromagnetic interference that looked almost ... controlled. "Hey," he said gently, setting down his toolkit but not moving closer. "My name is David. I work here, fixing things that break. Can you tell me what's happening?" The woman he remembered hearing her name was Zerathiel, looked at him with surprise. "You're not running away?" "Should I be?" David asked.
"Yes."
"Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're as scared as everyone else." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I am terrified. This happens sometimes when my emotions become too strong. I try to control it, but after so many years alone," she trailed off, looking ashamed. "How long?" David asked quietly. 237 years, she whispered. "I have been alone for 237 years. Sometimes the loneliness becomes so heavy that I cannot bear it, and then ... this happens." David felt something twist in his chest. He couldn't imagine being alone for 2 centuries. He couldn't imagine never being able to touch another person, never being able to hug someone when they were sad or shake hands when they met. "The other maintenance workers who got hurt," he said, thinking out loud. "They weren't hurt by touching you, were they? They just got too close when one of these episodes happened." Zerathiel nodded miserably. "The energy builds up inside me. When it releases, anyone nearby gets affected. They fall unconscious, or get sick, or ... double quotes. She shuddered. "Sometimes worse things happen." David pulled out his scanner and pointed it at the flickering lights. The readings were fascinating. There were electromagnetic pulses happening in patterns that reminded him of brainwaves. It was like Zerathiel was broadcasting her emotions as energy waves. "Has anyone ever tried to study this scientifically?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, has anyone ever looked at this as a problem to be solved instead of a curse to be feared?" Zerathiel stared at him. Do you think it can be solved?" "I think everything can be understood if you study it long enough," David said. "And if it can be understood, maybe it can be fixed." Over the next few weeks, David found himself spending more and more time in the diplomatic section. He told his supervisor he was monitoring the electrical systems, which was technically true. But really, he was getting to know Zara, so it was incredibly intelligent. She had studied 17 different languages and had read thousands of books about human culture. She knew more about engineering than some of the engineers David worked with. She could solve complex mathematical problems in her head and had insights. Came into quantum physics that made David's head spin. More importantly, she was kind. Despite everything she had been through, despite being alone for over 2 centuries, she still cared about other people. She worried about the maintenance workers who had gotten hurt. She felt guilty every time her emotions caused system failures. She spent her days reading and learning, preparing for a future she wasn't sure she would ever have. "To be a bride," she told him one evening, as they sat in her quarters, carefully maintaining their distance. "My people sent me here to marry someone from your species to seal an alliance between our worlds. But how can I marry someone I can never touch? How can I have a family when I cannot even hold a child?" David's heart ached for her. "What do you want?" he asked. "Forget what your people want. Forget the alliance. What do you want?" "Zerathiel, was quiet for a long time. "I want to know what it feels like to hold someone's hand," she said finally. "I want to comfort someone who is sad. I want to feel connected to another person, even just for a moment." "And what if we could make that happen?" David asked. "What if we could find a way to control this energy, to make it safe for you to touch people? You really think that is possible?" "I think anything is possible if you have the right tools and the right motivation," David said. "And I've got both." The next day, David went to see Dr. Alina Rodriguez. She was the station's expert on alien cultures, and she had been studying Zarathiel's situation from the beginning. "I've been thinking the same thing," Alina said when David explained his theory. This isn't magic. This is some kind of psychic phenomenon, probably related to her species' natural abilities. The trauma of being isolated for so long has made it impossible for her to control." Together, they started developing a plan. Alina would provide the scientific background and cultural knowledge. David would handle the technical aspects. They would study Zarathiel's condition systematically and try to find a way to help her. But their plan faced immediate opposition. Captain Harrison was worried about safety. The Velthari officials were concerned about interfering with their sacred curse, and some of the station's residents were getting increasingly hostile. A group led by a man named Reverend William Blackwood started holding daily protests outside the diplomatic section. They claimed that Zarathiel was a demon sent to corrupt humanity, that her curse was divine punishment for some terrible sin. They demanded that she be sent away or locked up permanently. "You're playing with forces you don't understand," Blackwood warned David during one heated confrontation. "That creature is not meant to be touched by human hands. She is cursed for a reason. The only curse here is ignorance," David shot back. "She's a person, not a creature. She deserves the same chance at happiness as anyone else." The protests were making Zarathiel's condition worse. Stress and fear were causing more frequent episodes. The electrical systems in the diplomatic section were failing multiple times a day. Other residents were demanding that she be moved to a more isolated part of the station. One night, David found Zarathiel sitting alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars through her window. "I should go back to my world," she said without turning around. "I am causing too much trouble here." "Your world is dying," David reminded her. "That's why you're here." "Maybe it is better to die on a dying world than to live forever alone on a living one," she said quietly. David felt something fierce and protective rise up in his chest. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that. Why do you care so much?" Zarathiel asked, finally turning to look at him. "You barely know me. Why are you risking your job, your reputation, your safety, to help someone you can never touch?" David met her galaxy eyes and felt his heart skip a beat. "Because everyone deserves to be loved," he said simply. "And because I think you're worth fighting for. You're silver." Silver's skin began to glow softly, and for a moment, David thought he saw hope. In her ancient eyes, David had always been the type of person who fixed things instead of running away from them. But as he sat in Dr. Alina Rodriguez's laboratory at 3 in the morning, surrounded by complex equipment and months of research data, he wondered if he was trying to fix something that was meant to stay broken. "Look at these readings," Alina said, pointing to the screens around them. "Every time Zarathiel has an emotional episode, the electromagnetic patterns change. When she's sad, the energy pulses slowly. When she's scared, it spikes rapidly. When she's angry, it becomes chaotic." David studied the colorful waves dancing across the monitors. "It's like her emotions are broadcasting themselves as energy waves." "Exactly. And here's the interesting part. The intensity has been decreasing over the past month, ever since you started visiting her regularly." David felt his heart skip. "You mean she's getting better?" "I think she's getting happier," Alina said with a smile. "Having someone to talk to, someone who treats her like a person instead of a monster. It's healing something inside her that's been broken for centuries." They had been working together for 6 weeks now, studying Zarathiel's condition every day. What they discovered was both heartbreaking and hopeful. The curse wasn't supernatural at all. It was a combination of natural psychic abilities and centuries of emotional trauma. The Velthari people had strong psychic gifts, but they were supposed to be controlled and focused. Zarathiel's abilities had been twisted by isolation and pain into something destructive. Every time she felt strong emotions, the energy had nowhere to go except outward, affecting everything around her. "We need to test our theory," David said, looking at the containment chamber they had built in the corner of the lab. "If we're right, then controlled contact in a safe environment should help her learn to manage the energy." Alina nodded, but her face was worried. "The risks are enormous, David. If we're wrong, you could be seriously hurt, or worse." "And if we're right, she gets her life back," David replied. "That's worth the risk." The next morning they presented their plan to Captain Harrison and the Velthari officials. The reaction was exactly what they expected. "Absolutely not," Captain Harrison said firmly. "I will not allow you to risk your life on some wild theory. The woman is dangerous." The lead Velthari official, Elder Corvain, was even more opposed. "You do not understand the forces you are dealing with. The touch of the void is not meant to be broken. It is a sacred burden, a connection to the cosmic forces that govern life and death." "With respect," Elder Corvain Alina said carefully, "our research suggests that the curse was enhanced by your people's priests. They used psychic manipulation to make sure Zarathiel would never be able to form connections that might make her resist her fate." The elder's golden face went pale. "How dare you suggest such a thing?" "We're not suggesting it," David said. "Pulling out a data pad? We're proving it. These energy patterns show artificial amplification. Someone made her curse stronger on purpose." The meeting ended badly. The officials refused to allow any experiments, and Captain Harrison threatened to throw David and Alina in the brig if they tried anything dangerous. But their problems were just beginning. Reverend Blackwood's protests were growing larger every day. What started as a small group of worried citizens had turned into a movement with supporters from all over the station. They carried signs calling Zarathiel a demon and demanding that she be sent away. "She's corrupting our children," Blackwood shouted during one of his daily speeches. "The longer she stays here, the more she spreads her evil influence." First it was the maintenance workers, then the electrical systems. What's next? Our water supply? Our air? The crowd cheered and chanted, "Send her away. Send her away." David watched from his quarters window, feeling sick. These people were talking about Zarathiel, like she was a disease instead of a person who had been alone for over 2 centuries. Things got worse when the protests turned violent. Someone threw a rock at Zarathiel's window. Someone else tried to break into her quarters while she was sleeping. The station's security had 2 postguards outside her door. "I should leave," Zarathiel told David during one of their evening conversations. "I am causing too much trouble." "People are getting hurt because of me?" "People are getting hurt because of fear and ignorance," David said firmly. "That's not your fault, but it is my responsibility," she replied sadly. "I have lived with this burden for so long. I should not have hoped that things could be different." David felt his heart breaking. After weeks of growing closer, after seeing hope return to her galaxy eyes, she was giving up again. "What if I told you I had a plan?" he said quietly. "David, no. Whatever you are thinking, it is too dangerous. What if I told you I was going to try to touch you, whether you agreed or not?" Zarathiel's silver skin began to glow with alarm. "You cannot. The energy discharge would be massive. You could die." "Then help me," David said. "Work with Alina and me to do this safely, because I'm going to try either way." She stared at him with those deep purple eyes. "Why would you risk everything for someone you can never have?" "'Cause I care about you," David said simply. "'Cause you deserve to know what it feels like to hold someone's hand. Because everyone deserves love." The next night, Alina received a message that changed everything. It was from a Velthari scientist named Dr. Theron, who had been secretly monitoring their research. "I have been studying the energy patterns you discovered," the message said. "You are correct about the artificial enhancement. The priests of our world used forbidden techniques to amplify Zarathiel's natural abilities. They turned her into a weapon disguised as a curse." Alina called David. "Immediately, we need to meet. Now." They gathered in the lab, where Dr. Theron appeared via hologram. He was young for a Velthari, with worried eyes and nervous gestures. "The truth is worse than you know," he said. Zarathiel was not just cursed. She was engineered. Her parents were chosen for their psychic abilities. She was trained from birth to be a living weapon, but the priests needed her to be controllable. So they made her believe she was cursed, that she was dangerous to everyone around her. "That's horrible," Elena whispered. "It gets worse. The dying of our world is not natural. There are entities from another dimension that feed on psychic energy. Our ancestors made a bargain with them long ago. Zarathiel was meant to be their permanent host, a living prison to contain them." David felt cold. "So if we break her curse, the entities will be freed, and they will look for new hosts. They could spread across the galaxy, consuming the psychic energy of every living being they encounter." The hologram flickered as Dr. Theron's connection became unstable. "But there may be another way. If Zarathiel's abilities can be properly controlled, if she can learn to channel them instead of being controlled by them, she might be able to banish the entities permanently." "What do you need us to do?" David asked. "You need to complete the bond. Physical contact between Zarathiel and someone who truly cares for her, someone who is not afraid of her power. It will create a feedback loop that could stabilize her abilities." The hologram started to fade. "But be warned, Elder Corvain knows what you are planning. He will try to stop you. He believes that sacrificing Zarathiel is the only way to save our world." The connection died, leaving David and Elena alone in the lab. "This is insane," Elena said. "Even if we succeed in helping Zarathiel, we could be unleashing something that destroys the galaxy." David was quiet for a long moment. "If we don't try? What if we let her live the rest of her life alone, carrying this burden, never knowing love or connection?" "She's one person, David. We're talking about billions of lives." "She's not just one person to me," David said quietly. "I think if we can save her, truly save her, she might be the key to saving everyone else too." Elena looked at him for a long time. "You love her?" "Yeah," David said. "I do. And I think she loves me too. Maybe that's enough to make this work." Outside, the protests were getting louder. Elder Corvain was probably already planning to take Zarathiel away by force. Time was running out. "All right," Elena said finally. "Let's save the galaxy." David barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Zarathiel's face, those galaxy eyes filled with centuries of loneliness. By morning, he had made his decision. Whatever the risks, whatever the consequences, he was going. To try to break her curse, Elena was already in the lab when he arrived, fine-tuning the containment field they had built. The device looked like a transparent bubble, surrounded by complex machinery designed to monitor and contain energy discharges. "The readings from last night are off the charts," Elena said without looking up. "Zarathiel's energy levels are spiking, higher than we've ever recorded. I think she knows something big is about to happen." "Or maybe she's just scared," David replied, checking the emergency systems one more time. "I would be if I were her." They had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The containment field would protect the rest of the station if something went wrong. The monitoring equipment would record everything that happened. The medical systems were ready to treat David if he got hurt, but none of that made him feel better about what he was about to do. "You know this could kill you, right?" Lena said, finally looking at him with worried eyes. "It could," David agreed. "But living without trying? That would kill me too, just slower." At exactly 9 in the morning, they went to get Zarathiel. They found her sitting by her window, staring out at the stars. She was wearing a simple white dress that made her silver skin glow like moonlight. "It is time," she asked, without turning around. "If you're ready," David said gently. She stood up slowly, like someone preparing to face their execution. "I have been ready for 237 years, but I am also terrified." "That makes two of us," David admitted. They walked to the lab together, staying carefully apart as always. But David could feel the energy crackling in the air around Zarathiel. Her emotions were so strong that the lights in the corridor flickered as they passed. When they reached the lab, they found they weren't alone. Captain Harrison was there with 2 security guards. Elder Corvain stood nearby with 3 other Velthari officials. And behind them, Reverend Blackwood had somehow gotten past security with a group of his followers. "I cannot allow this, Captain," Harrison said firmly. "The risk is too great. You cannot stop us," David replied. "This is our choice to make." "David Chen," Elder Corvain said in his formal voice, "you do not understand the forces you are dealing with. If you break the sacred bonds that contain the touch of the void, you will unleash chaos upon the galaxy." "The only chaos here is the chaos you created," Alina shot back. "We know the truth about what you did to her." Reverend Blackwood stepped forward, his face red with anger. "This is blasphemy. That creature is an abomination, a test of our faith. You cannot purify what the universe has deemed unclean." "She's not a creature," David said, his own anger rising. "She's a person. She has feelings, dreams, hopes. She deserves the same chance at happiness as anyone else." The argument was interrupted by a soft voice. "Please," Zerathiel said, stepping between the groups. "Please stop fighting because of me. I have caused enough pain." She looked around the room at all the angry faces, then turned to David. "Maybe they are right. Maybe I am meant to be alone." David felt something fierce and protective rise up in his chest. "No," he said firmly. "You are not meant to be alone. Nobody is." He walked toward the containment field, ignoring the shouts from Captain Harrison and the protests from Elder Corvain. Lena quickly activated the systems, sealing them inside the transparent bubble. "David, do not do this," Zerathiel pleaded, backing away from him. "If something happens to you, I will never forgive myself." "And if I don't try," David said, continuing to approach her slowly, "I'll never forgive myself." Outside the containment field, chaos erupted. Reverend Blackwood was shouting about divine punishment. Elder Corvain was frantically trying to override the lab systems. Captain Harrison was ordering his security guards to break down the barrier. But inside the bubble, there was only David and Zerathiel, facing each other across a distance that suddenly felt enormous. "I'm scared," Zerathiel whispered, her silver skin beginning to glow brighter. "So am I," David admitted. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." He took another step forward. The air around Zerathiel started to shimmer like heat waves. Electronic devices inside the containment field began to spark and flicker. "David, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "What if I hurt you? What if the curse is too strong? Then we'll face it together," David said, reaching out his hand. "I'm not afraid of your curse, Zerathiel. I'm afraid of never knowing what it feels like to hold your hand." The energy around her was building to dangerous levels. Outside the containment field, alarms were blaring. Alina was shouting readings that David couldn't hear over the humming of its electromagnetic force. Zerathiel looked at his outstretched hand like it was both everything she had ever wanted and everything she had ever feared. "Years," she whispered. "I have not felt another's touch for 237 years. "Then it's time," David said gently. She took a step toward him, then another. With each step, the energy around her grew stronger. The lights in the lab went out. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything in red shadows. "I love you," David said, his hand still extended. "Whatever happens, I need you to know that." Zerathiel's eyes went wide. "You, love me. Love your brilliance, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you care about others even after everything you've been through. I love your laugh and your curiosity and the way you make me want to be braver than I am." She was crying openly now, her tears glowing silver as they fell. "I love you too. I have loved you since the first day you were not afraid of me." They were only inches apart now. David could feel the energy crackling between them like electricity. His hair was standing on end. His skin was tingling. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she agreed. Their hands touched. The world exploded into light. Every system on New Geneva Station went dark at the same moment. The massive energy discharge was so powerful that ships docked outside felt their hulls vibrate. Emergency. Alarms that had been silenced by the power failure somehow kept wailing in the darkness. In the lab, the containment field held, but just barely. Blinding white light filled the bubble where David and Zerathiel stood. Elena's instruments, the ones that hadn't been fried by the energy surge, showed readings that should have been impossible. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. The light faded. The emergency power flickered back on. The center of the containment field, David and Zarathiel stood hand in hand. They were both glowing softly. But it wasn't the chaotic energy of before. This was gentle, warm, peaceful. Zarathiel's silver skin had stopped its restless shifting. Her galaxy eyes were bright with tears of joy. "I can feel it," she whispered, staring at their joined hands in wonder. "I can feel your warmth, your heartbeat, your life force, and it is not hurting you." David squeezed her hand gently. He had never felt anything so perfect in his entire life. "How do you feel?" "Complete," she said, smiling through her tears. "For the first time in centuries, I feel complete." Outside the containment field, everyone was staring in stunned silence. The curse was broken. Impossible had happened, but their celebration was short-lived. Elder Corvain's face had gone pale with horror. "What have you done?" he whispered. "The bonds are broken. The entities are free." As if summoned by his words, the lights began to flicker again. But this time, it wasn't Zarathiel causing the disturbance. Something else was stirring in the darkness between dimensions. Something hungry. The darkness that swept through New Geneva Station wasn't natural. It moved like living smoke, creeping through the corridors and seeping into every corner. People started screaming as the shadows touched them, draining their energy and leaving them pale and weak. David and Zarathiel were still holding hands inside the containment field when the first wave hit.
Yes.
Zarathiel's eyes went wide with terror as she felt the familiar presence of something she had carried inside her for centuries. "They are free," she whispered. "The entities from the void dimension, I can feel them spreading through the station." Elder Corvain was frantically working at a control panel, his golden face twisted with panic. "The containment bonds are completely broken. The creatures are loose and searching for new hosts. They will consume every living being on this station." "How do we stop them?" David asked, still not letting go of Zarathiel's hand. Corvain replied bitterly, "This is why the curse was necessary. Zarathiel was their prison. Without her containing them, they will spread across the galaxy like a plague." Alina was studying her instruments, her face pale but determined. "Wait, look at these readings. The entities are avoiding the containment field. They can't get close to David and Zarathiel." She was right. The dark shadows swirled around the laboratory, but they stayed away from the transparent bubble where the couple stood. It was like there was an invisible barrier protecting them. "Your connection?" Alina said excitedly. "The bond you created when you touched, it's generating some kind of protective field." "There." Thiel closed her eyes, concentrating. "I can feel them out there, but they cannot touch me anymore. David's love, his acceptance, it has changed something fundamental about my energy." "Can you use that somehow?" David asked. "Can you push them back?" "I do not know. I have never tried to control my abilities before. I was always taught that they were a curse to be contained, not a power to be used." The screaming outside was getting louder. Through the lab's windows, they could see people running through the corridors, trying to escape the spreading darkness. Some were already collapsed on the floor, unconscious and barely breathing. "We have to try," David said firmly. "I didn't risk everything to save you just so we could watch everyone else suffer." Zarathiel squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. "If I try to fight them, the energy release could be enormous. It might destroy the station. If we do nothing, the entities will destroy the galaxy," Alina pointed out. "The choice is clear." Captain Harrison's voice crackled through the emergency communication system. "All remaining personnel evacuate to the lower levels. Seal emergency bulkheads." This is not a drill. But David and Zarathiel knew that running wouldn't help. The entities could move through solid matter. They fed on life energy, not physical forms. Nowhere on the station would be safe. "I need to understand them better," Zarathiel said, closing her eyes again. "They have been part of me for so long, but I never tried to communicate with them." She reached out with her mind, following the dark tendrils of energy that connected her to the entities. What she found surprised her. "They are not evil," she said suddenly. "They are hungry, lost. They have been trapped between dimensions for thousands of years, feeding on whatever energy they could find. They do not want to hurt people. They just want to go home. Home? David asked. To their own dimension? But the portals between worlds were sealed long ago. They have been prisoners. As much as I have been, Elder Corvain looked shocked. That is impossible. Our ancient texts say they are demons, creatures of pure malice. Your ancient texts were written by people who were afraid, Zarathiel replied. Fear makes us see monsters where there might be only lost souls. She turned to David, her galaxy eyes bright with sudden hope. What if we could open a portal? What if we could send them home instead of destroying them? Can you do that? Alina asked. Not alone, but with David's help, with our connection. Zarathiel smiled. I think we might be able to tear open the barrier between dimensions. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Captain Harrison's voice came through the intercom. He had apparently been listening to their conversation. It's more dangerous than letting them consume every living thing in the galaxy. David asked. There was a long pause. What do you need? Alina quickly explained what they would have to do. The station's main power core would need to be rerouted through the laboratory. Every available energy source would have to be channeled through David and Zarathiel's connection. The risk of explosion was enormous. If this goes wrong, we could tear a hole in space itself, Alina warned. And if it goes right? David asked. The entities go home. Zarathiel keeps her freedom, and the galaxy stays safe. Then let's do it, David said simply. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Engineers rerouted power cables through the laboratory. Scientists calibrated instruments they had never used before. The entire population of the station gathered, in the lower levels, as far from the experiment as possible. Through it all, David and Zarathiel never let go of each other's hands. Their connection had become a lifeline, not just for them, but for everyone on the station. Are you ready? Alina asked as the final preparations were completed. David looked at Zarathiel. Together? Always together? She replied. They closed their eyes and reached out with their combined power. Zarathiel's natural psychic abilities, enhanced by centuries. A forced isolation merged with David's human determination and love. Together, they created something that had never existed before, a bridge between dimensions. Built from pure emotional connection, the laboratory filled with swirling light as reality began to bend around them. The entities felt the call and came. Rushing toward the portal that was opening in the space between worlds, it is working. Zarathiel shouted over the roar of cosmic energy. I can see their home dimension. It is beautiful, full of light and warmth and others like them. One by one, the shadow creatures poured through the portal, eager to return to their own realm. As they passed through David and Zarathiel's connection, both humans could feel their gratitude, their relief at finally being able to go home. The last entity paused before entering the portal. It touched Zarathiel's mind gently, and she heard something like a voice made of starlight. Thank you for freeing us all, it said. You were never our prison. You are our guardian, keeping us safe until someone could show us the way home. Then it was gone, and the portal began to close. The laboratory fell silent. The dark energy that had plagued the station for hours was completely gone. David and Zarathiel stood in the center of the room, still holding hands, both of them glowing softly with residual energy. Is it over? David asked. Zarathiel smiled, and for the first time in centuries, it was a smile of pure joy. It is over. The entities are home. The curse is broken. And she squeezed his hand. I am free. 6 months later, David and Zarathiel stood on the observation deck of a small research station on the edge of known space. They had left New Geneva together, choosing to build a new life far from the politics and fear of the civilized worlds. Any regrets? David asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Zarathiel leaned back against his chest, marveling as she always did at the simple miracle of human touch. How could I regret finding love? They had become something unique in the galaxy. A team that specialized in helping other species with supernatural or unexplained phenomena. Their connection, forged in crisis and strengthened by love, gave them abilities that neither could have possessed alone. Dr. Rodriguez sent another message, David said. 3 more cases this month, haunted asteroid mine, a planet where time moves backward, and a species that accidentally erased themselves from existence. Busy month? Zarathiel laughed. But I suppose someone has to help the lost and the cursed find their way home. Speaking of home, David said, turning her around to face him, I have something for you. He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal two simple rings, made from metal that gleamed like starlight. They are beautiful, Zarathiel whispered. They are made from the same alloy as the containment field that protected us, David explained. Elena had them specially crafted. They would always remind us that love is the strongest force in the universe. David Chen, Zarathiel said, tears of joy streaming down her silver cheeks. Are you asking me to marry you? I am asking you to spend forever holding my hand, David replied. In this dimension or any other. She kissed him then, long and deep, and around them the stars themselves seemed to pulse brighter. Somewhere in the distance, in a dimension full of light and warmth, grateful entities felt the echo of that kiss and smiled in whatever way shadow creatures smile. Love had saved them all. Love had brought everyone home,